Snow whispered against the earth like an ancient lullaby, burying the landscape in silence. The wind, sharp and searching, curled between skeletal trees and over the ridges of the Montana wilderness. It wasn't just cold, it was the kind of cold that clung to the bones, that erased footsteps seconds after they were made. The sky hung low and gray, oppressive with the weight of an unending storm. Daniel Reese trudged forward, breath frosting with each exhale, camera slung over his shoulder, boots crunching through drifts that reached mid-calf. He wasn't supposed to be out here. The ranger station had issued a storm warning early that morning, but Daniel had ignored it, like he ignored most things these days. Life had a way of falling apart quietly, first the routines, then the passion, then the very sense of time. Since Sarah died, Daniel had come out to the mountains more and more, not in search of beauty but in search of emptiness. There was something comforting about the stillness. The wild didn't ask questions. It didn't offer sympathy. It just existed brutally and honestly. His gloved hand reached for the strap of his camera, more out of habit than purpose. He hadn't taken a shot all day. Nothing moved. No deer. No eagles. No fleeting glimpses of foxes darting between the trees. Just white and silence. And that was fine. He didn't need a picture. He just needed to feel the cold. A sound cut through the wind, sharp, hoarse, guttural. Daniel froze. It was distant but unmistakable. An animal. Not a wolf howl, not a coyote's laugh. It was broken. Desperate. He turned toward it instinctively, heart accelerating. He was several miles from his cabin now, and the storm was closing in faster than predicted. Going toward an unknown sound in this weather was not smart. But something in the cry, there was pain in it. And Daniel recognized pain when he heard it. He pressed onward, cutting through trees, slipping slightly on the snow-slicked incline. The sound came again, closer now but weaker. He squinted through the gray haze and then he saw it. At the edge of a clearing, half buried in snow, was a horse. No, not just a horse. A Mustang. Its coat was thick and matted with frost. Snow clung to its flanks and mane. One of its legs was stretched awkwardly forward, trembling. Blood, dark against the white, dripped slowly from the ankle. The animal's chest rose and fell in sharp, shallow bursts. It tried to lift its head when it noticed Daniel, but it collapsed again, exhaling a ragged, shuddering breath. Daniel stood in shock. What was a Mustang doing out here alone? Injured. Dying. He knew these creatures ran in herds, wild and proud. To find one here, isolated and near death, didn't make sense. The Mustang shifted slightly and its eyes locked with his. That look, it stopped him cold. Wild animals didn't look at humans that way. It wasn't fear. It wasn't aggression. It was pleading. Like it understood that this man might be its only chance. Daniel dropped to one knee slowly, pulling off his glove. His breath caught in his throat as he extended a hand, palm up. The horse didn't flinch. He moved closer, heart hammering. His mind shouted warnings. He wasn't a vet anymore, hadn't treated an animal in years. What if it lashed out? What if he made it worse? But his hands moved anyway. The leg was swollen, likely twisted or broken. The blood was slow but steady, indicating a tear rather than a puncture. Around the horse's chest were scratches, raw and fresh. Maybe a fall. Maybe something worse. Daniel scanned the trees behind him. No other horses. No predators. Just him and the dying creature. He unzipped his coat, not even thinking. Carefully, he draped it over the horse's neck and shoulders. It was absurd, he knew that, just fabric against the cold, but the gesture was more than warmth. It was a bridge. "You're not dying today," he whispered. He didn't know where the words came from. He hadn't spoken aloud in hours. The horse blinked slowly as though hearing him. Daniel moved with newfound urgency. He had to get the Mustang back to the cabin. But dragging a half-ton animal through snow wasn't realistic. Carrying wasn't an option. Even getting it to stand would be a miracle. He pulled off his backpack and rummaged through it. A small tarp. A length of rope. Useless. Then his eyes landed on the foldable sled he used for hauling gear. Reinforced plastic. If he could just maneuver the horse onto it. Took everything. Snow soaked through his clothes. His fingers burned from cold. The Mustang groaned once, a low, exhausted sound as Daniel tugged, braced, shifted. Slowly, painstakingly, he managed to maneuver the horse's front half onto the sled. Then the back. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Daniel tied the animal down, looped the rope around his waist, and began the agonizing journey back. The wind screamed now. The temperature dropped with every step. But Daniel didn't stop. He couldn't. The presence of the horse behind him, so still, so silent, was like a pulse beating in his spine. He didn't look back. He didn't want to see if the horse's eyes were closed. It took nearly 2 hours to cover a mile and a half. By the time the cabin came into view, Daniel's legs were numb. His shoulders ached with strain. But he pushed open the door with one last grunt and cleared the space beside the hearth. The fire was long dead. He got it going again with shaking hands and rushed outside. He dragged the sled to the door, then, inch by agonizing inch, pulled the Mustang inside. The floor was covered with old quilts, and he lowered the horse onto them as gently as he could. Then silence. Just the crackle of flames. Daniel sat beside the animal, breath rasping, body broken by the effort. The Mustang didn't move, but its eyes were open, watching him. He reached out, brushing snow from its forehead. "I had a horse once," he murmured. "Her name was Belle. She was my wife's. I couldn't save her. I couldn't save either of them." His voice cracked. The firelight flickered across the Mustang's face, casting shadows that danced over its fur. It didn't respond, of course, but somehow Daniel felt hurt. He stood, fetched water, and gently tilted the bowl toward the horse's mouth. To his surprise, it drank. Slowly. Weakly. But it drank. Hope ignited like kindling. The storm howled louder outside, battering against the windows, but inside, a strange calm settled. Daniel layered blankets over the horse. He checked the wound again. It would need cleaning. Possibly stitching. He'd need supplies from the old shed out back. But not yet. Right now, the only thing that mattered was the faint rhythm of breath in the silence. The shared warmth between two broken beings. As the fire glowed brighter, Daniel sat down beside the horse again. Its head tilted, barely perceptible, and rested, just slightly, against his leg. A connection. Fragile, impossible, and real. He closed his eyes. In the heart of a merciless winter, something stirred back to life. And it wasn't just the horse. Tomorrow would bring questions. Challenges. The possibility of failure. But tonight, in this small cabin in the snow-locked wild, there was only this. A man, a Mustang, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected to need. And Daniel, for the first time in a long time, didn't feel alone. The morning arrived hidden behind a curtain of gray clouds, light struggling to seep through the frost-covered windows of the cabin. Daniel stirred from a restless sleep on the floor, back aching from the uneven planks and thin blanket. For a moment, he forgot where he was, until the soft exhale of the Mustang beside him pulled him back. The horse was still alive. He pushed himself up, blinking sleep from his eyes. The fire had dwindled to glowing embers. Carefully, he added kindling and coaxed it back to life. The warmth began to creep back into the room, slowly peeling away the stiffness in his joints. Then he turned his gaze to the Mustang. It hadn't moved much during the night. Its breath was shallow but steady, and its eyes, though heavy, fluttered open as Daniel knelt beside it. There was a quiet intelligence behind that gaze, watchful, cautious, but not afraid. "I guess we're still doing this," Daniel murmured. He fetched a bowl of warm water and a rag. The horse tensed slightly as he cleaned the leg wound, but didn't resist. He hadn't had to restrain it. That was rare. Even domesticated horses kicked at strangers. But this one endured him. Trusted him, somehow. Daniel remembered the vet kit stored in the shed. Most of it was outdated, some of it buried under years of disuse. Still, something in him had refused to throw it away after he quit. Maybe he knew deep down that life would one day demand he pick it back up. He stepped outside into the biting wind, pulling his coat tighter. The snow had stopped falling during the night, but the cold lingered like an echo. The landscape was untouched, pristine, and completely indifferent to the human struggle within its borders. Inside the shed, he found what he needed: saline solution, suture thread, an old syringe of broad-spectrum antibiotic. All still intact. The smell of sterilizing alcohol was faintly familiar, like a ghost from another life. By mid-morning he returned to the horse. Kneeling beside it again, he worked with practiced precision, clearing the wound, flushing it, stitching the torn skin. The Mustang whimpered once, then was silent, eyes fixed on him like it was trying to read his thoughts. Daniel couldn't stop the memories from creeping in. He had once been known for his touch with animals, horses especially. After veterinary school, he and Sarah had opened a small clinic outside Bozeman. They'd worked side by side, treating everything from colicky ponies to abused rescues. But that life shattered the day the truck slid on black ice. Sarah had been driving. Belle, her mare, had survived the crash but never walked the same again. Daniel never forgave himself for not being there. He quit the clinic, sold the house, and buried his guilt in silence. Now years later he was stitching a wild Mustang back together in the middle of nowhere, and something in that felt like fate's cruel poetry. As the hours passed, the horse began responding. Its ears flicked at sounds. It shifted slightly to ease pressure on its injured leg. Daniel watched it closely, studying the subtle changes. There was resilience in this creature and something else, something more profound. It wasn't just surviving, it was waiting. For what, Daniel didn't know. He stepped outside again as dusk approached. The clouds had parted slightly, revealing the pale gold of a sinking sun. He looked toward the distant ridgelines, half expecting to see a herd, some sign that this horse wasn't entirely alone in the world. But the hills were empty. As he turned to head back in, he caught sight of something in the snow. Tracks, hoofprints, but not from the injured Mustang. Larger. Deeper. 4 sets, maybe 5, clustered together near the tree-line. Daniel's pulse quickened. There was a herd nearby. And they had come close. Maybe they were watching. Maybe they had come searching for the one who hadn't returned. He scanned the horizon again but saw nothing. Inside he lit the lanterns and prepared some oatmeal. He wasn't sure if the horse would eat any, but he left a bowl near its mouth, mixed with apple slices he'd stored for emergencies. Then he sank into his chair, exhausted. The horse shifted again, drawing his attention. It didn't eat, but its eyes remained open. Focused. Curious. Daniel tilted his head. "You've got a story, don't you?" The horse blinked once. He sighed and rubbed his face. "I used to think life made sense. That it was all about control. Plans. But life doesn't work that way. It just takes." The words fell from his mouth without permission. He hadn't meant to talk. But the silence inside him was too full. "I used to believe in second chances. Then I stopped. I figured some things don't get fixed. Some people don't deserve to be whole again." He looked down. "But maybe I was wrong." The Mustang's ears flicked forward. Daniel laughed softly. "What, you think I'm being too dramatic?" A gust of wind rattled the windows and the fire cracked loudly in the hearth. The moment passed. The cabin fell quiet again. He leaned back in the chair and closed his eyes. The sound came just before midnight. A sharp snort. Then a shuffle. Daniel sat upright. The Mustang had moved, more than before. Its front legs were tucked beneath it now and it was trying to raise its back. "Easy," he said quickly, kneeling beside it. "Don't rush it." But the horse wasn't panicking. It was focused. Deliberate. With a strained groan, it managed to rise halfway. Then, trembling, it settled back down. Still progress. Daniel exhaled, heart pounding. "You stubborn thing," he muttered. And he smiled. The night passed slowly, full of pauses and quiet sounds. By dawn, the Mustang had managed to sit upright. It drank more water. It accepted a few bites of the apples. It was fighting. So was Daniel. For the first time in years, he felt like he was building something again, not just repairing a wound but forging trust. Brick by brick, breath by breath. The day remained quiet but not empty. Each time Daniel looked into the horse's eyes, he saw less pain and more presence. Not tame, not broken, but aware. Connected. Like the beast understood this strange human who had pulled him from the jaws of death and given him warmth instead of fear. Daniel found himself speaking more, telling stories, memories. About Sarah. About the clinic. About the loneliness that had grown inside him like a shadow. The Mustang didn't move much, but it listened. He felt that. And speaking gave the silence shape. By evening, the horse attempted to stand again. It failed. But it tried. And Daniel didn't miss the meaning of that. This wasn't just an animal recovering from injury. This was a wild thing choosing inch by inch not to give up. And Daniel, who had buried his will to keep going years ago, now found it stirring again in response. He sat close to the fire, watching the flickering light dance over the Mustang's coat. The swelling had gone down slightly. The stitches held. The tremble in its legs was less pronounced. Outside, the wind began to pick up again, howling like a morning song. Inside, man and beast sat in shared quiet. Both haunted. Both healing. Daniel didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The herd might return. The Mustang might slip again. But right now there was progress. There was breath. There was warmth. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he hadn't already lost everything. The storm was returning. But this time he wasn't afraid. The snow had thickened again by morning, swallowing the cabin in a white hush. Daniel stood at the edge of the porch, mug of bitter coffee warming his hands, eyes scanning the forest line beyond the meadow. The trees stood frozen in silence. Not a single crow called. Not a single branch shifted. That kind of quiet wasn't natural. It felt like the breath before something broke. Inside, the Mustang was on its feet now, albeit unsteady and sore. It had refused to stay down that morning, its defiance as clear as the storm-dark clouds rolling across the sky. Daniel had watched the horse rise, tremble, then plant its hooves firm and still. A survivor's stance. But something had changed overnight, an energy in the air, an itch at the base of his spine. He didn't recognize it at first. Not until he spotted the trail, new tracks in the snow, leading up toward the ridge. Not from the Mustang's herd. These were human. Heavy boots. Deep prints. At least 2 men. They hadn't come to his door. Just passed by. Quietly. Watching. Daniel's blood chilled faster than the wind. He knew what that meant. Hunters. Not the kind who chased deer or tracked elk legally. These were the kind who moved in the shadows, poaching wild horses for meat, money, or sport. He'd heard rumors they still operated deep in Montana's backcountry, far from rangers and rescue programs. Few dared confront them. The law hardly reached that far. He went back inside and locked the door behind him, not because it would stop anyone but because it made him feel a little less exposed. The Mustang raised its head at his entrance, ears twitching at the change in his rhythm. Daniel sat down slowly, rubbing his jaw. They know you're here. The horse didn't flinch. It stood there, still breathing hard but resolute. As if it understood that it had walked from the clutches of nature only to enter a different kind of danger. Daniel hadn't faced another human in weeks. Now he had to prepare for men who wouldn't hesitate to kill a horse, or anyone who got in their way. He thought about calling for help, but his radio was busted and the nearest ranger station was 2 hours out on a snowmobile, if you knew the trails. And they surely didn't leave calling cards. The horse limped forward a few paces, its eyes searching Daniel's. The message was wordless but clear. We have to move. Daniel opened the closet and pulled out his winter pack. Rations, rope, emergency flares. Then the hunting rifle. He hadn't touched it in years. Hadn't needed to. But the feel of it in his hands now, solid, real, brought back old instincts. The cabin wasn't defensible, not for long. And if those tracks were as fresh as they looked, the hunters would return. They'd seen the prints from the injured Mustang. They knew it was here. They might come tonight. Daniel debated leaving immediately, but the snow was deep, and the horse wouldn't make it far in daylight. It needed a few more hours. So he waited, every second stretching his nerves tighter. He watched from the window. Rechecked the rifle. Stoked the fire but kept the light dim. Just before dusk, the silence broke. A crow screamed. Then another. The forest erupted. Daniel sprang to his feet. The Mustang bolted upright too, stumbling but ready. Through the trees a shadow moved. Then another. Men, 3 of them, cloaked in camouflage, rifles slung, steps calculated. Daniel backed away from the window. They're here. He grabbed the reins he'd fashioned for the Mustang, not to trap it but to guide it. He opened the back door silently, the cold knifing in like betrayal. The woods behind the cabin sloped sharply downward into a ravine. Dangerous terrain but cover-rich. It was their best chance. Come on, he whispered. The Mustang hesitated only a moment. Then it limped beside him, silent as falling snow. They slipped into the trees. Behind them, boots crunched on the porch. Place is abandoned, one man said. Another voice answered, low and amused. You see those fresh droppings? Horse was here. And not long ago. Daniel kept moving, heart hammering. He guided the horse down through the thick pines, listening for every snap of twig or breath of wind. The ravine would lead to the old riverbed. If they made it there, they could follow the ice for miles. Gunshots cracked behind them. Not at them, warning shots. The men were testing the silence. The Mustang flinched but didn't panic. Daniel whispered calming words he didn't remember learning. Just sounds now. Sounds of safety. Trust. They reached the bottom of the slope, feet skidding on packed snow. The horse stumbled, nearly falling, but Daniel caught it under the neck and steadied it. We're almost there. Then a shout. There. In the trees. A rifle barked. Bark splintered near Daniel's head. He didn't wait. He and the horse ran. Adrenaline pushed the Mustang harder than it should have moved. Daniel could feel it, how each breath from the animal came out like smoke-fueled thunder. But it ran. Wounded and limping, it ran. Not away but toward something. Toward freedom. The riverbed appeared ahead, a vast open channel of ice winding through the forest like a serpent's back. Daniel led the horse onto it carefully, testing each step. The surface held. They ran. Behind them, curses echoed. Damn things on the ice. Shoot the man. The horse'll stop. Another shot rang out. Daniel dropped flat, dragging the horse down with him. The bullet missed. He rose again. Go. Come on, move. But the Mustang stopped. Its ears rotated backward. It turned just enough to face the treeline. The hunters had emerged from the woods, pacing like wolves on the edge of the ice. They didn't step forward. Too risky. Smart beast, one muttered. You let that thing go, another warned. You're throwing away 10 grand. That's what a live wild stud gets on the black market. Daniel stepped in front of the Mustang. Rifle raised. Breathing hard. Try me. There was a pause. Tension stretching between the two sides like drawn wires. You got no right, one said. That horse don't belong to you. Daniel didn't lower the rifle. He doesn't belong to you either. Silence. Then grudgingly the men retreated into the trees. Daniel didn't believe it was over, but he knew they wouldn't chase across the ice. Not with darkness coming. They were poachers, not fools. He turned back to the Mustang. Its chest heaved. Eyes wide. But it had not fled. He looked at it, really looked. Snow crusted its mane. Its leg bled again, the stitches tugged loose. But it stood there, waiting for him. Not because it was tame. Not because it was owned. But because, somehow, it chose to trust him. Daniel lowered his rifle. The shaking started then, relief, cold, fear catching up all at once. He walked forward, placed a hand against the horse's neck. I'm not letting them take you, he whispered. The wind howled across the ice. The journey back to the ridge would take all night. They would need shelter again. But something inside Daniel had changed. A line had been drawn, not just between him and the hunters, but between who he had been and who he was becoming. He looked at the trail ahead. The hunt had come. But they were still standing. And the fire that had once died inside him was now burning again. Not just for survival, but for something worth saving. The forest was still in the aftermath. Cold lingered like a shadow, but the Mustang and Daniel had survived the hunt. They had crossed the frozen river, scaled the southern slope under the veil of moonlight, and now, 3 days later, the valley opened before them like a long-held breath. The snow had thinned at the lower elevation, giving way to patches of frozen grass and brittle shrubs. It wasn't safety, not entirely, but it was sanctuary for now. Daniel had built a temporary shelter from fallen branches and tarps near the edge of an abandoned ranger outpost. The cabin had long since collapsed, but its foundation remained solid. A fire crackled inside the crude structure, and the Mustang lay nearby, its head resting on its front legs, breath steady, wounds healing. The fever had broken. The infection fought off. Daniel had nursed it through the worst of the storm, through blood loss, through the hunt, and through something even deeper neither of them had spoken aloud. Trust. He sat beside the horse now, a canteen of melted snow cradled in his hands, watching the horizon. He'd managed to get a shortwave radio working again with spare parts scavenged from the ranger station. He'd sent a signal 2 days ago, a call not for help but for hope. And today he was waiting. But as the sun rose, something else stirred first. The Mustang lifted its head suddenly, ears perked, nostrils flaring. Not fear this time. Recognition. Daniel followed its gaze across the wide stretch of snowy earth, where a soft rumble echoed in the stillness. More than one. Dozens. The herd. From the far ridge, they descended like shadows cut loose from the mountains. A flowing mass of muscle and grace, manes tossed by the wind, their coats glinting in the low light. Wild horses, survivors of the storm and ghosts of a fading frontier. The lead mare, a tall sorrel with a jagged blaze across her face, called out. A low, drawn whinny that cut through the quiet. The injured Mustang responded with a sound Daniel hadn't heard before. Not quite a cry. Not quite a challenge. A song maybe. Or a farewell. It rose, slow and careful, testing its leg. Still tender but strong now. Recovered enough. Daniel didn't move. His chest was tight, breath caught between pride and sorrow. The horse stepped forward. Not toward the herd. Toward him. It stopped inches away, lowered its head, and pressed its muzzle against his shoulder. Daniel's hand rose on instinct, resting between its eyes. I guess this is goodbye, he murmured, the words thick. But he wasn't sure if he meant it. The horse turned then with one last glance and limped forward, each step stronger than the last. The herd didn't flee. They waited. And as the Mustang reached them, the sorrel nudged its side gently, accepting him back. The circle completed. Daniel watched them go. The herd moved like wind, untamed and unconquered. The Mustang didn't look back again. It didn't need to. His place was out there. And Daniel, his was here. Or so he thought. The crunch of boots behind him startled him back to the present. He turned sharply, hand brushing the hunting rifle leaning against the firewood pile, until he saw the figure emerging from the trees. Not a hunter. A ranger. She raised one hand in peace, her face windburned but kind. "You Daniel Rusk?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah. We got your signal." She stepped closer, scanning the area. Her eyes landed on the departing herd, then on the makeshift shelter. Then on him. "You're the one who sent the coordinates for the wounded Mustang?" "I was," he said. "But he's better now." Her lips twitched in a half-smile. "So I see. There's been word about this one. The black with the frost-marked mane. Some say he was the last of a band taken out last winter. Others say he ran through a wildfire and came out the other side. People made stories." "People always do," Daniel said softly. The ranger nodded, respectful silence falling between them. "You saved him." Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked at the path the horse had taken, already softened by snow. "No. He saved himself. I just stood in the way of what tried to stop him." The ranger's gaze turned thoughtful. "We're working on a new protection corridor," she said after a beat. "A place where the herds can roam safer. Farther. We could use eyes out here. Boots on the ground." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. "You offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a purpose. Same thing out here." For a long time he said nothing. The fire popped. The wind shifted. In his chest something stirred, a sense of motion. Of release. He looked at her. "I'll think about it." She nodded. "Take your time." But he already knew. That night the stars were visible for the first time in weeks. The sky stretched black and clean and full of cold fire. Daniel sat under it, his back against a pine, rifle across his knees, not in fear but in watchfulness. He no longer felt like a man escaping something. The silence didn't feel like loneliness anymore. The cold wasn't punishment. It was clarity. He closed his eyes and in the distance he imagined the beat of hooves, fast, alive, wild. And in the echo of that sound he heard his own heartbeat matching it. In the morning he would walk back up the ridge. He would take the ranger's offer. He would guard the land the horse had run through. Because something had happened in the snow. Something unbelievable. Not just survival. But redemption. And redemption once found doesn't stay still. It runs. Wild.